Okay, so welcome back to all of you. We're going to have right now the intervention by Denise Carrascosa and her presentation entitled Translating Abolitionist Black Feminism. So Denise Carrascosa holds a PhD in Literary and Cultural Theory and Criticism from the Federal University of Bahía and a postdoctoral degree in History of Africa, the Diaspora and Indigenous Peoples by the Federal University of Recôncavo de Bahía. She's a literary translator, lawyer, and associate professor of literature at the Federal University of Bahía. She led the research project Traduzindo no Atlântico Negro and has coordinated for 15 years the abolitionist outreach project Corpus Indóceis e Mentes Livres, in which she worked with incarcerated women and literature. There, she founded the Biblioteca Mentes Livres, enabling sentence reduction through reading. In the field of translation, she has acted as editor of Traduzindo no Atlântico Negro, Cartas Náuticas Afrodiaspóricas para Travessias Literárias, and Traduzindo no Atlântico Negro, Dinâmicas Exosíacas em Rotas de Fuga e Performances de Religação Afro-Ancestral. She translated also the poetry book Quilombelas Americanas. As a guest author, she launched in 2023 at the Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty this book, O Pacto de Bocapiu, that I have here, A Cumplicidade Silenciosa do Feminegricídio de Estado nas Prisões. And in 2025, so very, very recently, she launched the English translation with the bears the title, The Bocapiu Hash, translated by Jess, Oliveira and Bruna Barros, initiating discussions on translating the testimonies of incarcerated Black women in Brazil. So, Denise, thank you very much for having accepted the invitation. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Buenos dias. Okay. Buenos dias. Good morning. Thank you so much, Gonzalo, Olga, Lupi, and everybody involved in the organization of this Congress, this colloquium, in which I've been learning so much and talking to you directly or listening to you in your presentations. So I'll try not to be too long so that we have time for exchanging information and perceptions, okay? And mostly, I'll try not to bring up so much theoretical and information so that you can cope a little bit or see a little bit what the praxis, the feminist, Black feminist practice in Brazil has been, and so that we can compare, see what we can do together transnationally. Well, translation, abolitionist Black feminism in Brazil. Let me pass the slide, press the arrow. Well, Brazilian social imaginary is historically shaped by the colonial nation legacy of slavery, almost 400 years of slavery, African people being trafficked to Brazil, racism, sexism, and necropolitical state punitive practices. So this violent history has positioned Brazil as a global leader in women incarceration following USA, China, and Russia, especially in the last 2 decades, when the so-called war against drugs has incarcerated almost 50,000 women, the majority of whom Brazilian Black young inhabitants of favelas, slum areas, very poor areas, and impoverished. The latest report from the National Mechanism for Prevention and Combating Torture from 2022 points to the prevalence of torture in women's Brazilian prisons through various techniques such as terrible infrastructural conditions, rotten meals, and very reduced quantity of meals, poor health care, police brutality, and institutional rape. So, of course, this is a brief report here to introduce the challenges of Black feminism in Brazil, considering incarceration, carceral violence, police brutality. So I'll go through 3 basic points. So the first point is to give you a certain critical feminist, Black feminist critical portrait of this institutional, systematic violence against Black women in Brazil. It's important to mention that in Brazil, which is a continental country, right? We now have a population of 211 million people around that, and in this population, we are 28%, naming we Black women. So we are almost 60 million people in Brazil. And this first point I'm approaching here is Black impoverished women in Brazil and the national necropolitics of their criminalization we have been calling Black feminicide, which all of its specificities. So I'll call one of our best well-known Black feminists, who was Lélia Gonzalez. Lélia Gonzalez, who was born in 1935, lived until 1994, Black feminist activist, anthropologist, and she has written a text which is seminal, fundamental for developing our theories and praxis, political praxis in Brazil around and building up Black feminism. The name of the text, written and published in 1979, is Racism, Sexism in Brazilian Culture. Whenever Angela Davis goes to Brazil, she mentions Lélia Gonzalez, and she publicly says that she has learned from Lélia Gonzalez. This text was presented at UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles in 1979. So Lélia Gonzalez is influencing African, I'll go to that term, feminism all around the world. I forgot to mention the interpreters. I'm looking at them, Jess, Jessica, and Che. And we've been talking a little bit before the lecture, the conference, so that we could adjust some terminology. And I think it's paying respectful attention to our profession as interpreters. And I'm not an interpreter. I'm a literary translation, and I think your work is so important and so challenging. So thank you for being here with me in this moment. Continuing, Lélia, I'm sorry. I didn't put the text on the slides. I'll call for your attention, not visually based, but based on the audio, okay? So Lélia Gonzalez, I'm sorry. In this text, Racism, Sexism in Brazilian Culture, in the 70s, is kind of constructing the concept of memory for African Brazilian population, especially for Black women, by calling our historical attention to the fact that the figure of the mummy or the nanny is the Black mother of a language we speak in Brazil, which she named, conceptualized as Portuguese, Black Portuguese. This Portuguese, Lélia, as an anthropologist and also psychoanalyst, has conceptualized, is kind of a language that had received many inseminations of African languages during the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. And there are, of course, some African languages that crossed the Black Atlantic with slavery, such as Yoruba, Kikongo, Kimbundu, and these languages, they have inseminated the colonial Portuguese and transformed, of course, the rhythm, the musicality, the phonetics, but also the grammar and the lexical of our language. So it's a highly important issue for us translators, considering the Portuguese we speak as something different from the colonial Portuguese. And Lélia was calling our attention as a Black feminist in the 70s for that. She mentioning Black women during slavery, a certain occupation they were enforced to assume, which was being mucamas, domestic slaves. They had to take care of the white sons and daughters of the Portuguese colonizers. And speaking African languages and also having to learn Portuguese because they would have been punished if they didn't learn Portuguese. They had to learn Portuguese, they were Christianized, okay? They were teaching, also exchanging languages with those babies and those children. That's the beginning of the thesis of Lélia Gonzalez, considering the genesis of this Black Portuguese she calls Portuguese. And she's saying, I'm translating from Lélia's text here, Black Portuguese, the mammies, Black mothers of our nation, they spoke Black Portuguese, and they taught that to the white baby in the colonial Portuguese culture, becoming the symbolic mother of the Brazilian culture. And when she's mentioning the word symbolic, it's a psychoanalytical concept of the word here. That's the reason, says Lélia, why Brazilian culture and language is Africanized. The concept that she's also constructing in the 70s and all along the 80s text she's publishing, which comes from that pedagogical or that pedagogy of Black women, is América Latina. You know the continent I'm coming from with the name Latin America. So Latin being the Rome Empire language producing Romanic or Latin languages. And Portuguese would be a son of this empire, linguistic empire. But what Lélia does as well is to say that we are not part, we Africanized people, we are not part of the Latin America, but the Latin America, because this D instead of the T is bringing up the phonology of Bantu languages. So instead of saying America, Lélia is challenging us to consider this culture which has inseminated powerfully the colonial Portuguese culture as América. So she creates the concept of Latin America. We are all part of the Latin America. And Latin America would be a geopolitical concept to put us together, not only in terms of a cultural heritage, but also in terms of political challenge of decolonizing all the violent legacies of sexism, racism, and all brutality of social institutions constituting the nations. And Brazil is not out of that geopolitical, of course. in Lelia's psychoanalytical perspective, the name of the father is a complex interplay of hierarchies displacing the white European male of the position of power. And the black mummies, the black women in charge, taking care of the white houses, they would, in this way, subreptitiously, in English, does this word exist? Yes. Subreptitiously, these women, they were challenging the powers linguistically, culturally, politically, the powers of the white European Portuguese male, assuming the architecture of the nature, but in a way in which we inseminated the culture and the imaginary of the Brazilian nation. And if you think of Brazil, please raise your hands. What do you think when you listen the name Brazil, or when you listen to my name and associated to me the word Brazilian? What do you think directly? Music. Nasreen? Music? What kind of music? Samba. A Quimbundo name. Batucadas. They're all Quimbundo. They're all coming from Congo, Angola. What else? Football? I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Forest. Okay. But yes, we have forests as well. Yes, and they are highly protected by our indigenous population. There are so many Africans, indigenous population taking care of the health of the world in our forests, okay? What else? Samba, the music is very strong. Don't you think of carnival? Don't you think of carnival? Okay. Our football was a little bit different, but in this process of globalization, it's been standardized more and more. But these are part of African culture. Carnival, samba, batucadas, and all of those that immediately associated to Brazil, because the marks of this insemination of these women, they were powerfully constituting the language through which, symbolic language through which we constructed our flowing identities. So this is Lelia's analyzing the basic reasons why we had to be all the time imprisoned, arrested, violented to bar the powerful force of our civilizations. So Lelia concludes the text, this one I'm citing here, by saying that prisons, hospices, police violence, and favelas, the slum areas, are the institutions which provide an active institutional form of repression of the African constant in our political unconscious. If we go to the juridical system, you're gonna see that during the 19th century, our criminal code was prohibiting all of those things, batuques, sambas, capoeira, a form of African, which is not African, it's Afro-diasporic, Brazilian, Baiano form of fight, and African descendant religions. All of those, if you check the 19th century penal code, you're gonna see they were criminally prohibited, criminally constituted in our society. Well, I'll move on to another very important Black feminist activist philosopher, Sueli Carneiro. Sueli Carneiro she has founded an institute which is absolutely important in Brazil for the definition of the goals and challenges and methods of Black feminism, Instituto Gallardes, coming from the Gallardes Society in the Yoruba Nigerian society. And Sueli has written a dissertation named The Device of Raciality. As a philosopher, of course, she's making a dialogue with the concept of device in Foucault's philosophy. How is the architecture of raciality being constructed in Brazil since the colonial period until modern and contemporary times? Citing from this thesis, I don't think it's translated, and I picked up some important moments so that we can connect to Lélia's explanation of the criminalization of Black women in Brazil, the historicity of this criminalization. Sueli Carneiro states, with her political philosophy, that racial relations in Brazil as a complex device of discourses and practices of racial domination produce violent subjectivization of Black people, especially Black women. She gives the example in this book of statistics of Black maternal deaths in Brazil in the 21st century at rates of 6.6 times higher, considering white maternal deaths. In the analysis, she concludes the racist biopolitics of state health care in Brazil kills pregnant Black women or Black women in childbirth, letting them die without proper assistance due to institutionalized racist sexism. Also, Black women are more prone to hysterectomy in a process of birth control of Black population. So we're talking, of course, of an eugenist state project against the Black population in Brazil. And this eugenist state project, of course, is based in the racist science of the 19th century. So we're talking of biology, we're talking of criminology, we're talking of sociology, anthropology, we're talking of all of those sciences. And just make me a digression here. Yesterday, I was listening to a very interesting presentation on interpreting and translation of the health system and juridical system, the language, which we as translators are challenging not to be binary and sexist or gendered. And when we do it as translators, I think we are challenging this racist, sexist epistemology of the 19th century in sciences. So this is still active in the state projects of assassinating, of producing genocide against populations, especially African descendant populations. And in Brazil, I'm not talking of all nations, everywhere. I'm talking of the place I'm coming from, the nation I come from, and I come from a state in Brazil called Bahía, B-A-H-I-A. It's in the seashore, the eastern seashore of Brazil, which is the blackest state in Brazil. Our population is 89% Afro-descendant, 89% self-declared Black. And this is the state that concentrates the highest numbers of Black women. And we see the project of the police, genocide of young Black people is running very fast and very successfully together with massive numbers of incarceration. So, going a little bit through this critical apparatus of Black feminism in Brazil. Now, from another point of view, from the point of view of the Black feminist activist, writer, poet, and novelist, Conceição Evaristo, she creates a term to identify resistances in this system, resistances, which is something some of us are highlighting in this Congress. What are we doing to resist the violent projects of globalization, capitalism that comes together with racism, sexism, and everything we are debating here? For Conceição Evaristo, she creates a term as also a literary theorist she is, which is named in Portuguese, escrevivência. I tried to translate it here into English for right living. Right living. Living, writing from the experience of living together in a community. Right living for Conceição Evaristo is not defined in the terms of Foucault's writing of the self, but writing of the us, writing of the community of Black women. So when she tells stories, what is implied in her storytelling are the values, the challenges, and the epistemologies and projects of future coming from Black women. So that's why we call her literature as a Black feminist literature. And she says in this text, in this book from 2020, Right Living, the writing of ourselves. This is my free translation, okay? Hello. For Black Brazilian women, who have inherited the vestiges, I'm citing Christina Sharp here, of the brutal history of transatlantic slavery, writing acquires a sense of insubordination because they have told us we can't write. They have told us we are not intellectuals. They have told us our place is in the domestic space to work for the owners of the White Houses. So writing acquires the sense of insubordination. It means that writing are one of the ways we have to prove our humanity in the memory tissue of culture. And also as the Black mummy to wake up slave owners' descendants from their unfair dreams. So she's dialoguing, making a dialogue with Lélia Gonzalez's figure of the Black mother, taking care of the white children of the slave owners, and she's saying, okay, when we were chanting, we were producing literature not to make them sleep, but to make them wake up from their unfair dreams. So these are her words in this book, Right Living, the Writing of Ourselves. She's creating a literary critical concept so that she can understand not only the literature that she produces, but also other Black women's literature in Brazil. Well, so in this first part of my talk, I'm kind of citing three women which we think in Brazil, they are some of the most important critical thinkers of Black feminism. Of course, that in Brazil, as we were, not we, Black women, but Brazil was colonized by Portuguese people. They speak colonial Portuguese. What happens? We are insulated. So what we produce, what we write needs translation. That's why we have to make this effort of making this critical thought to circulate around the world to produce a certain net of Afro-diasporic internationalization of the systems of resistance through critical thought, through writing and activisms. That's why I'm citing the work I have produced together with researchers of Federal University of Bahia from 2015 to 2024. The research group is finished, but all participants of the research group, Black women, most of them, and LGBT Black people, they are translators now. They are working in the market of translation and interpretation in Brazil. They were formed in this, we were all formed, I didn't form anybody, we were all formed discussing issues, methodologies, techniques of translation. We call this project, which was an institutional project based at Federal University of Bahia. We named it Translating in the Black Atlantic. And we have published 2 books, 2 collective books, okay, with our methodologies of translation, interpretation, naming the challenges we have in Brazil considering this field. This is one of the books. This is the first, published in 2017. Our publisher, all made of Black people and artists, writers, etc. They are publishing this book on their site, Editora Alguns. I didn't write it on the slide, I'm sorry. But you can ask me afterwards or email me and I'll tell you. And they'll do it as a free, open ebook, okay? You can check, there are like 7 texts here in this first volume with 1 interview. And the single interview is with a wonderful Black feminist interpreter, Raquel de Souza, in which she analyzes the problems of interpretation, racist, sexist interpretations in Brazil. Just to tell you, to give you an example of yesterday, Chimamanda Adichie was in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, and she was terribly translated because she was bringing up issues of race, of course, and violence against Black women, etc., and interpreters, they were not prepared for the kind of discourse. I think it's one of the dimensions of discussions in this colloquium we are making part. Okay, the second book is here. I brought it to the group and Olga, and, and you see how that book, the first book, is constituted of 7 texts. This one, more than 30 people. And it's not only organized by me. It's organized by 5 professors, 5 Black professors, 4 of them Brazilian, Black Brazilians, and 1 African, Felix Ayomidire, Nigerian professor. Raquel de Souza is a professor and interpreter. The other of us are literary translators. Okay, so in this first book, Translating in the Black Atlantic, the introduction of the book brings this excerpt. I'll read it so that we understand in the second moment of this reflection here, what would be the critical, aesthetical, and political role of Black feminist translation to challenge race, gender-based police violence and carceral violence against our sisters. As translators, what can we do? What could possibly be our tasks? Black women translators' subjectivity. That's the one of the texts that I include in the preface of this book you are seeing now. The task of Afro-diasporic translation can be conceived as a function articulated to the existence of Black women translators in Brazil, insofar as our subjectivities are produced viscerally linked to Afro-diasporic issues, experiences, and dangers, wherever this translator is in the post-slavery world. Linguistic cultural skills are intensely intertwined with the subjective experience that marks the exercise of translation task with our bodies, memories, and affections. If we understand that the statements and discourses produced by the text of Black diaspora perform a communicability of experiences between its different points, The Black women translator works as that person who enables the possibility of seeing, feeling, thinking about the intercultural difference of these experiences, exactly where they surpass linguistic barriers in points of connectivity inscribed in the bodies and subjectivities of those who translate them. These women translators are not only prepared to translate texts that are not visibly ethnical, racially marked, or the so-called technical texts. Our lives are made of an oftentimes continuous tense negotiation to our own human condition, in post-slavery societies. As subjects intellectually capable of dealing with language, the translation of supposedly neutral texts constitutes a prosaic task in the face of the immense challenge that is to translate oneself as a person humanly capable of intellectual tasks. Well, I'll stop a little bit of reading here to approach the epistemological fact that for us, translation is not only a material professional task, it's part of our ontology as Black women in diaspora. So we're always negotiating our existence. We're always kind of trying to survive the violent procedures, techniques of state, colonized, and still maintaining torture as its technique of existence. So this negotiation, daily, violent, problematic, that has to change mechanisms along the time of our lives, we are calling translation in an ontological approach, in a philosophical approach. In this book, the text that opens the book after the preface is of a professor from the Brown University, Professor Jerry Augusto, and she is she has been an interpreter in many countries in the African continent, and also in Brazil, and also in the US, and also in Europe. And she's stating and developing this concept, Jerry Augusto, as translation as an ontological practice of Black women. So we're approaching a different understanding of translation here. And it's one of our fundamentals to think of that. We have exercised the practice, we, Black women, of translating Black texts based on a praxis that considers translation as a performative process that organically involves the body, speech, and memory of the translators and its inscription located in the historical and geopolitical space as a starting point for the projection of dialogues with others in a culturally inscribed subjectivities in other points of the Afro-diaspora. So this reflection upon Black women translators' subjectivity in Brazil is the ontological base for the political and ethical debates about our tasks, considering the issue of carceral violence and police brutality against our sisters. In this sense, how can we translate abolitionist feminism, Black feminism, or take abolitionist Black feminism as a task of translation? This is the second book. So, what's the critical, aesthetical, and political role of abolitionist feminist translation to challenge race, gender-based policy and carceral violence against our sisters? These are one of the questions which was raised collectively for us, by us. We did it together. How can we use this ontological position of being translators and also all the tools we have as translators to challenge the situation of state violence in Brazil against our community, especially our sisters. Now, I think one of the slides, yes, I'm sorry. Task number 1, I'm reading, but it's not in the slide, okay? I'm sorry. First, experimentation with an answer. Creating a common language to produce a useful cartography of the issue in order to challenge the system of criminal justice and the juridical values and norms which validate punishment in the form of prison and police. The concept of state black feminicide that we are kind of organizing in this performance, o Pacto de Bocapiu, the Hush Pact. So, to try to respond to this broad question, the first experimentation with a response would be, can we create a common language so that we can make a cartography of concepts so that society, Brazilian society, visualize and understand the visceral violence constituting its institutions? Which are the terms we can create? But they are not on the surface of the conceptual debate, so that we can philosophically produce a map, so that society can visualize the violence, deal with the violence, which is a violence which is in the political unconscious of the nation, considering what Lélia Gonzalez has brought for us in this discussion. So what is in the political unconscious has to be translated to come to the surface. We have to give some symbolic language to it. So our first experimentation that comes from our praxis in prisons for 15 years is the concept of black feminicide. In Portuguese, we call it feminegricídio. We're approaching the phenomenon, the violent phenomenon of feminicide, considering the particularities of black women as the most important target of the feminicide in Brazil. And we're trying to consider not only individual cases of black feminicide, but the state as one of the social institutions promoting, influencing, creating all the conditions for black women to be assassinated in Brazil, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Because I didn't include in this presentation here, otherwise it would take us a lot of time. We would need another space, conference, colloquium, whatsoever, to approach the spiritual dimension of this issue. But I'll give you an example. When we go into prisons, wherever we are, but especially in Brazil, and especially particularly in Bahia, we women which constitute ourselves, our individualities, personalities, singularities, by a form of existence which is ancestral, coming and having our divinities, deities, ancestors from Africa, and we have rituals for that. In prisons, we are being Christianized, evangelized, and the rituals, the religions, the beliefs, the forms of existential constitution, they are being kind of violently fought against, raped, disrupted. So it's one dimension that would give us time for another Colloquium entirely debating that. There is a spiritual war. And of course, that all wars are based on spiritual discussions, terms, and capitalization of spirituality. So, so this first answer, or experimentation with an answer I brought for us to reflect upon here, is how do we create language? And this is for us a task of the translator. And this specific case I'm trying to study here with you is black women translators in Brazil. We're trying to create language so that the whole society can understand or engage in beginning to understand the history and the unconscious forces of violence against us in action in that society. So one of the terms is black feminicide. What are the conditions for the exercise of continuous daily black feminicide? By killing the sons of these mothers, the brothers, the parents, whoever of these mothers, black mothers, by incarcerating them, by submitting them to daily brutality of police, by submitting them to daily symbolic violence, eliminating their culture through abstinence, which is another concept developed by Sueli Carneiro in this work I've showed you. It's a set of procedures which are producing the violence against black women in Brazil. We're calling black feminicide, so that we have the opportunity, the possibility, and the challenge to study all the techniques involved in this form of state violence. Second, experimentation with an answer for that former question. Collectively building up the discursive and aesthetical platforms to create space-time architectures for amplifying the existences and voices of women who are victims, the victims of criminalization, police brutality, and incarceration through literature, visual arts, performance, music, dance, cinema. We have built 15 years ago, and the project is still on, this extension project named Imbecile Bodies and Free Minds. So to spare us some time, I will ask Gonzalo to show us the beginning of that video.
Há grande silêncio sobre o que acontece com elas dentro das celas. E elas estão em processo contínuo, diário, de libertação desse grande silêncio.
Coração do mar é terra que ninguém conhece. Permanece ao largo e contém o próprio mundo como hospedeiro.
Corpos indocentes y mentes libres. It is an exciting project that brings prisoners together with professional actors to dramatize their realities and their lives.
É projeto entusiasmante que reúne mulheres encarceradas de tal forma que elas possam dramatizar suas realidades e suas vidas.
Cadê Kelly Cristina de novo? A fuga de Joana. Você viu que deu jeito? Cadê Flávia de novo? A fuga, todo mundo bota a fuga de Joana em cima, hein? Cadê Dona Roquelina? Tá sendo maquiada. A fuga de Joana tá aqui na sua mão. Gelmara, sua fuga de Joana. Selma, a fuga de Joana. Segura a fuga de Joana nas mãos, hein? Geisa, Ângela, a fuga de Joana. Gostei desse batom, ficou lindo em você. Marluce, a fuga de Joana. Dona Vanilda, cadê tu? Aqui. A maquiagem tá chegando na mão da senhora? Tá. Patrícia, novamente. A fuga de Joana. Patrícia, você tá uma figura lindíssima. Adorei seu figurino. Cada uma de vocês
está com a carta de liberdade na mão. A fuga de Joana. A carta de euforia, a liberdade, a beleza, a alegria, a realização dos sonhos, o renascimento, a beleza.
Eu sou Joana. Não estou mais aguentando esse sofrimento, longe dos meus filhos, Carlos e Urbano.
Sinto imensidão de sentimentos confuso. Desesperada, tento fugir das aflições, da dor.
Por causa da injustiça, busco uma saída. Espero que dê certo. Fugirei, nem que seja para o deserto.
Com sofrimento, ela ia planejando como sair daquele lugar. Dias iam se passando e ela só pensava como se libertar.
Era muito sofrimento e muita escravidão. Ela se sentia encurralada, sem saber para onde ir.
Meu coração, na minha fuga, batia forte. Os meus pensamentos apenas em reencontrar os meus filhos.
Que foram levados e escravizados ainda quando criança. Que mãe não perde o sentido da vida?
O dia está chegando, ansiedade é o meu nome. São 3 anos aqui dentro. Nunca pensei que esse dia iria chegar.
Com minha garra e minha coragem, vou conseguir fugir sim. Vou enfrentar tudo e todos.
Eu tenho que escapar. Eu vou lutar para me salvar. Pois Carlos e Urbana eu tenho que encontrar. Tomara que Gabriel dê por minha falta e venha em meu calço. Aí então, vamos encontrar os seus irmãos e vamos lutar juntos. Quem sabe, encontraremos um ser de bom coração e ajude eu, Gabriel, Carlos e Urbano, nos aforreando. Eu vou conseguir, eu vou lutar até o fim.
A partir de hoje, mulher liberta, não retorna por aqui. Vamos badalar pela liberdade de...
So, the second, thank you, Gonzalo. The second, actually, this is a documentary produced by Patricia Freitas, and she's a black play, oh my God. I was looking to my students, reading their poems and their texts in Portuguese and English just flew. Because I absolutely connected to them. So Patricia Freitas, she's a filmmaker. She's a black lesbian filmmaker. And she produced this documentary, which was in fact the process of creation of that book, this book here. Fleeing Firminas, which is a book of poetry. So they were Maria Firmina dos Reis. She is the first abolitionist writer in Brazil. She's from Maranhão. She was a black writer, considered to be the first novelist in Brazil, the first woman to write a novel ever in Brazil in the 19th century, and she was an abolitionist. So in this year, every single year, we pay homage to one black woman writer in prison, and the creative process is based on her work. So in 2022, the creative process was based in Maria Firmina dos Reis' work. And the result of the creation was a collection of poetry entitled Firminas em Fuga. These books, they are sold, and the result of the selling comes back to the imprisoned women's hands through a prize we have created, the Literary Abolitionist Prize, named in homage to Maria Firmina dos Reis. So the Literary Abolitionist Prize, Maria Firmina dos Reis. So they receive a prize in money, in certificates, and reduction of penalty, because in Brazil, in our judicial system, the norms of reduction of penalty, they are associated to reading in prisons. So for each book which is read and summarized and evaluated, they can have 4 days less in their sentences. So it's a whole system of work in which creativity, art, and also fighting for liberation collectively is implied. Well, so in the second experimentation of an answer to the question we have posed, collectively building up the discursive and aesthetical platforms to create space-time architectures for amplifying the existences and voices of women who are the victims of criminalization. So we've been working with theater, we've been working with photograph, with cinema, with dance, with short stories, with poetry, as I've showed you, with testimonies. So each year, there's been 15 years in a row, we are publishing something so that their voices can be heard, can integrate the debates for abolition in Brazil, can challenge the system of dehumanization of their existence and invisibility. Last but not least, the third experimentation for trying to answer the question we are posing ourselves, what can we do as translators? Translating theoretical and artistic texts into as many languages as possible, so to produce transnationalization of debates and disruptions of the logicity of national punitive language systems. So here, I think I have it here in the slide. This book, written by Angela Davis, Gina Dent, Erica Miners, Beth Ritchie, Abolition, Feminism Now, was translated by Raquel de Souza. You've seen her together with Angela Davis in the conference at Federal University of Bahia. And I've done the preface, and Raquel has translated it. In my preface, I'm calling the attention of Brazilian readers of the book that abolition is a language, is a form of language. And abolition has to be also performed linguistically. So what I'm calling readers to understand what should be or could be their linguistic text, what kind of language could be invented, creating, not only literally, but in other dimensions of our body language performances to amplify this calling for abolition if we understand prisons and police as institutions which promote genocide, black genocide in countries such as Brazil and the United States, etc. So these would be one of the forms which we are trying to answer to that question. How can we transnationalize the debates, and how can we challenge the punitive systems which are also made of language? This is part of the preface, and that's why I'm going to show you the book we are launching today. It's the last book we've published. We launched it at New York City University in January or February. The name of the book is Bocapiu, The Hush Pact, The Silent Complicity of the State's Black Feminicide in Prisons, and this is a translation, a performatic translation of a performance that actually happened in 2017 in the Women's State Penitentiary of Bahia, directed by me, but in amplified coordination with imprisoned women. And they were talking about their stories, making visible and audible how they got to be there incarcerated and what were the consequences of that incarceration. But the fact that we have created here a performative technique of kind of including the reader to understand what is her or his role in this silent complicity in state black feminicide. And to do so, we have used as a creative device the Bocapiu. I brought the object and I showed the interpreters so that we understand what is it. The translator's paratext, which is the introduction, Jess, Oliveira, and Bruna Barros, they are part of that group, translating in the Black Atlantic, and they did a wonderful introduction here, explaining the Bocapiu device as an object of creative, inventive, performative abolition artifact. And I'm going to read just a little bit, right? Jess, Oliveira, and Bruna Barros. First, a small anecdote. When we were just starting Bocapiu, the Hush Pact's translation, one of us went to the city's market in Salvador to buy some things. They had to go around the entire market looking for little mocos. Nobody had them, until finally someone did. They asked for 9 mocos, but there was only one in the store. The others were in the storage. So the vendor asked her colleague, "Hey, pega aí o Bocapiu pequeno." A mocó is a Bocapiu, which is an Amerindian word, an African word, which is a hybrid of a Bantu, a language, word, together with an indigenous Tupinambá word. Some people would describe them as straw tote bags. A Bocapiu holds secrets inside it. It is skillfully braided, and no Bocapiu is the same as another. Their colors vary according to their material. The word Bocapiu contains 2 other words, boca, mouth, boca is mouth, and piu, piu, chu, sh, Twitter, pen or hush. Bocapiu would then also mean roughly mouth, twit, or mouth, hush. What would then be a Bocapiu hush pact? A pact of messages, a pact of silences, a pact of secrets, a small straw tote bag full of voices and patterns. If you want to find out what is inside it, first you must find out how it feels to hold it in your hands. But be aware, some secrets must rise to the surface. Others must and will remain hidden. This text has secrets. It has its own tempo. In all texts, it presents a challenge. It will ask you to do certain things. This one called us to carefully listen. Thus, the first step in translating Bocapiu, the Hush Pact, was engaging with its liveliness, its opacity, and letting it guide us. The text compelled us to read it aloud. In doing so, we became part of a bigger choir. Throughout the process, we coexisted with the text, with its many voices and pains, with its stories. This Bocapiu you now have in your hands is the result of that coexistence. The English version you're about to read and listen to is what came out of these encounters between text and translators, mothers and daughters, sisters and friends, strangers and ancestral families, the coexistence with that which one doesn't want to capture in a text, but that which one coexists with. Translating it felt like sitting together on those straw mats and listening, surrendering to its rhythms, its wisdom. And once we tune in to that tempo, embracing secrets, veiled and unveiled, once we sit on those straw mats listening to Munga's wisdom, what visions of freedom emerge? How many visions of freedom are within our hearts? Can we remember them? Can we take on the responsibility for one another? Can we commit to reimagining how we want to live collectively, to have no fear. This book's part of a wider political project to dismantle punitive grammars. It is an invitation for us to envision freedom together in community. Listen carefully and get ready to be changed and to change. That's it. Thank you. I hope we have time for
Yes, thank you very much for this brilliant presentation, Denise. And now we have around 20 minutes, because we started a little bit late, for questions and comments. I think so. No, yes. So do we have some questions and comments?
Thank you so much. That was moving and stimulating, and I'm so happy I attended your talk. I was wondering if you had some thoughts to share about the space for orality, because you had this quote about the fact that Conceição Evaristo saying that right living is escrevivência. And I totally understand, but I was also curious to hear you about how, if writing is our humanity, then when African cultures and indigenous cultures and a lot of resistance cultures go through orality, and how do you articulate both things? I mean, they can coexist, absolutely, but I'm really curious to hear you about it.
Will you do a block or each question?
No, each question.
Okay. Nazarene, thank you so much for your question. It gave us so many possibilities of responding, but I'll mention that in the concept Conceição Evaristo is creating, she is envisioning these forms of writing which doesn't necessarily involve the graphic writing on the paper, writing with the body. And she mentions in this book how she learned to write from her mother, who didn't know how to institutionally write, because she had to do the laundry for white people. And to call the sun for the laundry to dry, she would draw a sun on the land to call it. It was a feitiçaria. How do you translate that? It was an act of religiosity. So to claim to the sun, but fetish is a problematic word for us, because it involves reification. It was used by Marxism. So it enchanting act, I'd say. And how this graphism of her mother, performative, was a form of writing that influenced her with her writing. So in the project, we are highly influenced by this view of literature. How do we do literature as an act of memory that can count on many platforms? On our chanting, on our dancing. When we are dancing, for example, what you've seen in the first moment of the video with those long skirts, incarcerated women, they were using and dancing and playing some samba to the rhythm of drums, is a divine dancing, a form of dancing, is an enchanting form of dancing to call for their ancestral spirits. So it involves the dressing, it involves the rhythm, it involves the music. It's a form of writing. So they're also writing with their bodies. There is a literary critic in Brazil, Black feminist, Leda Maria Martins, that has created a term, a concept named Afrographic. Afrographism of memory. How do we write our memories, inscribing it disruptively in history without papers. So this is one of our technologies in prison, to disincarcerate the souls of those women who are our sisters. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Vogue, yes. Wonderful, wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nazreen.
Okay, we have another question here. Do you understand Spanish?
Yes, I understand Spanish.
Okay, so
Lupi?
Yeah.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por la presentación, que como tan brillante que te hace mover muchas cosas, ¿no? Pensar. Estaba pensando también como en la idea de la construcción de este lenguaje que es conceptualmente relacionado, ¿no?, con las vidas de las personas, de las mujeres en concreto afro, y cómo se traslada, por ejemplo, a otros espacios geopolíticos donde el racismo se manifiesta de manera diferente, pero también muy concreta en espacios, ¿no? Estoy pensando en la situación, por ejemplo, geopolítica aquí en el Estado español, en Cataluña más en concreto, donde los centros de internamiento de extranjería, las mujeres negras, racializadas, no sabemos ni siquiera qué pasa en esos espacios, ¿no?, porque no tienen intérpretes, ¿no? Estoy también pensando en las cárceles, ¿no?, llenas de mujeres, ¿no?, con niños o con quitas de custodia de sus niños también,
sí,
¿no?
Sí.
Y de qué manera, que son en las mujeres en general, pero muy específicamente con la población negra, también racializada de otras partes de Latinoamérica. Y de qué manera crear, ¿no?, estas expresiones que tienen que ver con la vivencia, con el cuerpo, ¿no?, para que también esto sea trasladado a la opinión, ¿no?, precisamente por la resistencia a aceptar que existe un racismo en los países donde no ha habido personas esclavizadas, donde las colonias han estado fuera, que no es tan evidente o la población piensa que no hay.
It's me here.
Gracias.
Gracias, Lupe. Se falo português, vocês entendem? Será? Mais ou menos, interpreters, more or less, like that. Can we experiment with that? Uma das respostas, das experimentações de respostas, Lupe, que eu trouxe aqui, é exatamente isso. E é um desafio, porque você não pode repetir o modelo colonial de universalizar respostas críticas, universalizar conceitos, universalizar práticas, que é exatamente a violência constitutiva da colonialidade. Tudo serve para todos em qualquer lugar, em qualquer tempo. Se faz um mapa, se vê de cima, numa visão aérea, e ali se aplica um modelo de solução internacional. Esse é exatamente um dos grandes problemas constitutivos da colonialidade racista, sexista, do cis-heteropatriarcado. Se estabelece um modelo único de resposta ou de visão, de perspectiva para tudo. Então, na nossa opinião, no Brasil, o importante é o Colloquium. É exatamente essa troca singular, horizontal, de experiências, de práticas, que podem receber muitos nomes diferentes. E cada nome e cada prática precisa ser respeitada na sua singularidade. Mas o que não pode faltar é a troca. Porque quanto mais nós estamos isoladas nas nossas problemáticas, menos a gente consegue ver soluções. Daí porque nós, quando falamos, okay, for the interpreters, yes? Can you follow me? Okay, I'll switch. Okay. when we mention, it's okay, but when we mention in translating in the Black Atlantic, the fact that we are negotiating our existences, our humanities all the time, this openness for otherness is the key to exchange, to seeing. Someone talked about empathy yesterday here. So one of the procedures of empathy, to open your eyes, your feelings, your experiences for the other's experiences. So this is translation in the very sense of what we understand, not as a universal language of political, of public politics or globalization of solutions, but how do we singular, particularly can exchange the local resistances we're promoting and help each other in this resistances we are creating. Maybe that's, I don't know if I responded, but this is what you made me reflect upon.
Sí.
Carmen?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for this talk. I'm delighted. I just wanted to know that if, as a result of engaging with these stories, this material during all the project, have you experienced, as many translators and interpreters do, any kind of vicarious trauma?
Oh, thank you for the question, Carmen. This is a very important question. Vicarious trauma. I've been working in prisons for 15 years now, non-stop, even during the COVID-19. We got to architect virtual interactions with imprisoned women. So all the time, these stories, very traumatic stories, they are brought up. And as being part of the community, I'm always feeling like it could be my aunt, it could be my sister, it could be my cousin, they could be part of my family. So it's something that, yes, I experience vicarious trauma. So their stories, they are part of my life now. So it's something that we activists, long-term activists, permanent activists, we have to deal with. What are the strategies we should collectively create to deal with traumatic experiences, self-care, and having a structure, in my case, family structure, community structure, spiritual care. So I'm a daughter of Oya Iansan. I don't know if you've heard of this Yoruba deity, and she's in my Ori, in my head. Ori is a Yoruba term for my spiritual head. So she's the deity of war and the winds. And she's been together with me. So it's also, it's a matter of spirituality and taking care of my spirituality. And together with my companions, we take care of one another. But of course, that vicarious trauma is present all the time. And we have to deal with it. It's part of us now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for maybe 1-2 questions if they are short enough. Questions, comments. Yeah.
One more?
Yeah, one more.
Obrigada, Denise, pela palestra. Eu fiquei muito interessada com o conceito de abolicionismo, né? Que num primeiro momento pensei, claro, situa no século XIX e você atualizou e usa ele conceitualmente para develar essas estratégias de violência atuais, recorrentes, né? Gostaria que você comentasse um pouco mais esse termo, quem sabe se é um termo normalmente usado, não conhecia. E achei muito pertinente.
Como é seu nome?
Meriche.
Meiche?
Sim, mais ou menos.
Sim? Can you repeat it? Can you repeat your name? Meditate?
Meditate.
Meditate. Meditate. Meditate.
É catalão, então é meio
Meditate.
complicado.
Meditate. Okay, thank you, Meditate. I made a point of learning everybody's names as a teacher. And I'm proud of being a teacher. Thank you so much. Yes, we didn't have here, I didn't have the opportunity to define the contemporary concept of abolition we're working with. I've given you a reference, Angela Davis, Gina Dan, Erica Miners, and Beth Ritchie, most recent book on the concepts and practices of contemporary abolitionism. But yes, we are firstly, we consider that the vestiges of slavery, they continue to produce their results in post-slavery, in post-slavery societies. So these vestiges, they are systematic structuring the institutionalized violence of these societies. So abolitionism as a movement of activists, especially feminists, especially black racialized feminists, in Brazil, black feminists, in a way is a form of mapping the continuation of the effects of slavery in the societies we belong to, producing critical, amplified perspective of this continuation through many studies in political sciences, philosophy, anthropology, sociology, arts, literature, translation, whatsoever. So making a transdisciplinary cartography of the permanence of slavery vestiges in societies and creating, as activists, the most diverse technologies for combating this permanence. So yes, the continuation of the abolitionist movement of the 18th and 19th centuries in societies under slavery, but of course considering that the modes of slavery have changed in modernity. So we have to change the modes of resistance to the permanence of slavery in our societies. Did I answer your question? Yes, thank you for the question. Thank you, Mary J.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's now, I think, lunchtime, but you can find Denise around or send an email, right? Also, let me remind you that we have some copies of the English translation, and the cost is €10, right?
Yes.
And you can pay in cash to like Lupe, Olga, or myself. So yeah, make sure you ask for that if you are interested. And now you are free to go. Thank you very much, Denise. Thank you very much to the interpreters for the marvelous work. Also translating from Portuguese, right, back then. So extra effort. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.